She thought it would be just another quiet visit to her son's grave. But as the wind whispered through the headstones, she saw something that made her stop cold. A young waitress, tears streaming down her face, clutching a little boy's hand. Their eyes carried a weight she couldn't ignore, and a truth she wasn't ready to face. What connected them to her son? And why would this chance encounter shatter everything she thought she knew? Eleanor Whitmore lived in a world where nothing was beyond her reach. The billionaire businesswoman was known for her sprawling estates, her luxury empire, and a steely determination that left little room for softness. Yet, beneath the layers of power and control, there was one wound she could never heal: the loss of her only son, Daniel, 3 years ago. Every month, without fail, she visited his grave. It was the one place where the noise of her world seemed to fade. On this overcast morning, the cemetery was quiet, the air heavy with the smell of damp earth. She expected solitude, a moment to grieve in private. But just ahead, something unusual caught her eye. A young woman in a faded waitress uniform, clutching the hand of a little boy. Both stood frozen before Daniel's headstone. Eleanor slowed her steps, her pulse quickening. She didn't know it yet, but this chance encounter was about to pull her into a story far more personal and far more dangerous than anything she had ever faced. Eleanor's heels sank slightly into the damp grass as she approached, but the waitress didn't move. The boy's tiny fingers gripped her hand tighter, his wide eyes flickering between Eleanor and the marble headstone. Something about the way he looked at her, curious, almost afraid, sent a ripple through her chest. The woman's name was Grace Miller. She looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that went beyond lack of sleep. Her uniform was clean but worn, the faded name tag hanging by a single thread. And yet, there was something fiercely protective in the way she stood in front of the boy, as if shielding him from something Eleanor couldn't see. A few halting words revealed the unthinkable. This little boy, Liam, was Daniel's son. Eleanor's mind reeled. Her son had never mentioned a child, never hinted at a relationship. Grace spoke softly, her voice steady despite the tremor underneath. Liam was all she had left of Daniel. Eleanor's instinct was to take control, as she always had. She offered money, more than Grace could make in a lifetime, to secure custody of the boy. But Grace's refusal was immediate and unshakable. She didn't just reject Eleanor's offer. She made it clear she wanted nothing from her at all. What Eleanor didn't know was that Grace had her reasons, dangerous ones. For 3 years, she had quietly been gathering evidence. Late-night meetings with lawyers who worked pro bono, interviews with investigative journalists who believed in exposing the powerful. Grace had seen the headlines about Eleanor's success, but she knew the truth. Behind the polished public image was a business empire built on exploitation, underpaid black and immigrant workers, illegal land grabs, and systematic silencing of those who spoke out. Grace had been one of those silenced once. She remembered the night she'd been dragged out of her workplace for questioning, accused of theft she hadn't committed. It wasn't about the money, it was about sending a message. She was young, black, and easy to intimidate. Eleanor's managers had made sure she lost not just her job, but her credibility. Now, standing at the grave, Grace knew the risk of speaking to Eleanor. Every instinct told her to walk away, but she also knew the truth had to come out. The boy beside her wasn't just Daniel's son. He was the heir to a fortune built on other people's suffering. And if Eleanor had her way, that fortune would never reach him. As Eleanor left that day, she thought she was walking away from a stubborn woman clinging to pride. She didn't see the quiet storm building behind Grace's eyes, or the files stacked in a locked cabinet in her small apartment. Files that could dismantle everything she owned. And soon, those files wouldn't be a secret anymore. It began with a single article. One journalist, one headline, and Eleanor's carefully built empire started to crack. Grace had handed over everything. Financial records, testimonies from workers, photographs of unsafe conditions, even death certificates of those who had suffered in silence. Within days, news stations were swarming. Former employees, mostly black and immigrant, stood before cameras, their voices trembling but unbroken as they told stories of abuse, intimidation, and stolen wages. Each testimony was another blow, Each truth another fracture in Eleanor's towering facade. Eleanor fought back. Her lawyers called Grace a liar, a gold digger, a woman using a child as leverage. But the more they tried to smear her, the more the truth shone through. The public was watching, and for the first time, Eleanor couldn't control the narrative. The breaking point came during a televised hearing. Grace sat at the witness table, her hands steady even as Eleanor's legal team tore into her character. They accused her of making it all up, of seeking revenge. But Grace didn't flinch. She told the panel exactly what Eleanor's businesses had done, how they had targeted vulnerable workers, how people of color were systematically denied fair pay and safe conditions, and how threats kept them silent. As she spoke, cameras zoomed in on Eleanor. The woman who once exuded untouchable power now sat pale and rigid, her empire crumbling in real time. When the panel revealed the verdict, Eleanor was to be indicted on multiple counts of fraud, labor violations, and abuse. There was no roar of celebration, only a heavy, undeniable truth. For Eleanor, this was the end of her reign. And for Grace, it was the moment she had been fighting for. A moment where the world could no longer look away. But the battle wasn't over. Not yet. In the weeks that followed, Eleanor Whitmore's name disappeared from society pages and business magazines. The empire she had spent decades building was dismantled piece by piece. Its assets seized, its corrupt practices exposed for all to see. The woman who once stood above the law was now just another inmate, facing the consequences she had evaded for years. For Grace, the victory was bittersweet. She had fought for justice, not revenge. Liam, now free from the shadow of Eleanor's control, would inherit what rightfully belonged to him, not as a trophy of wealth, but as a safeguard for his future. Grace used part of the settlement to set up scholarships for children from marginalized communities, determined that no one else would have to climb the same impossible walls she had faced. But the story was bigger than her. For every Eleanor brought to justice, there were countless others still profiting from the suffering of those without power. The testimonies of Black and immigrant workers that had cracked Eleanor's empire were not rare. They were the quiet truth of industries across the world. Grace knew the fight wasn't over. She also knew that one voice, backed by courage and evidence, could bring down giants. And if her story could inspire others to speak, then maybe, just maybe, change could come faster. Because in the end, this wasn't just about one billionaire, one waitress, or one boy. It was about a question we can no longer ignore. How many more lives will be buried beneath injustice before we finally say enough? If this story of courage and justice moved you, take a moment to think about the power of standing up for what's right. Share it so more people can see the truth behind the headlines. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories that need to be heard.